Did your school also have one of those kids, the ones that look like they don't shower and their clothes are always torn or ripped? They wear old, shabby shoes that look just a little too small for their feet. At my school, I was that kid. And don't think for a second that I wasn't reminded of it every 2 minutes. Not only was I that kid who looked like she'd gotten her clothes from a dumpster, I was also the nerd. Tough, right? Before I continue, make sure you hit those like and subscribe buttons. We appreciate it. As a nerdy kid, what do you think my favorite school event was? If you guessed science fair, you are absolutely right. I would always walk into the multi-purpose room ready to crush it and win first place. But my sophomore year, it was different because I felt strongly about what I had made.
And the winner is...
we heard on the intercom,
Diana.
I jumped from where I was sitting and celebrated. Do you want to know what I won with? Let me tell you. I knew I had to really bring it to this science fair if I wanted to beat the new girl, so I completely outdid myself. I was reading a comic book when I came up with the idea X-ray vision glasses. I stayed up way past my bedtime many nights to get them just right. After I won, I felt like I could do so much more. I told my parents I was going on a walk after dinner and walked to the nearest gas station. On the counter, there were rolls of scratcher lottery tickets. I put my glasses on and looked at them. I bought a chocolate bar and the winning scratcher. My glasses allowed me to see the ticket with the jackpot underneath. I went home, scratched it in front of my parents as they told me off for wasting money. Oh, I forgot to tell you. My parents weren't broke. They were just cheapskates. Anyways, imagine the look on their faces when the ticket said I had just won $1 million. Of course, this went on for a very long time. My parents made it a routine that after picking me up from school, we would go buy any winning scratchers we found. Our fortune was growing day by day, each day more than the one before. Now I'm a billionaire, 8 years after winning that high school science fair. I'm in my early 20s. I should have had a booming social life, but I was lonely. The day my life began to change, I was alone in one of my mansions. I was simply walking around the empty house when my doorbell rang. I looked at the window and saw it was pouring rain. Who could it be? I thought. I jogged to the door, grabbing the baseball bat I had next to it, and opened the door a little. On my porch, I saw a young man. He looked my age. He was dripping from the rain. His clothes were soaked.
Hi, my car broke down. Do you mind if I use your phone?
The guy asked. I reluctantly let him in and led him to the telephone. He looked familiar. I felt like I'd seen him before, which was slightly comforting. He came back into the living room and thanked me for letting him use the phone.
I know it's a lot to ask, but is there any way I can stay here for the night?
He asked, and he was right. It was a lot.
You can lock me in a room with only a mattress or something. I don't mind,
he joked. I told him I didn't even know him, so he introduced himself as Enzo. I'm Diana, I said. I took him to my guest house. I had some clothes there that would fit him, so I let him take a shower and went back to the living room to watch my movie, but keeping my eye on the door of the guest house to make sure he didn't try to murder me. He came back a few minutes later, rubbing his hair with a towel.
Some house you got here,
he said.
Reminds me of an old classmate of mine. She was a nerd, but now she's loaded.
He then stopped and looked at me with wide eyes.
Diana?
He gasped. Then he started naming almost everyone I went to high school with, and that's when it hit me. The man in front of me went to my school. He was friends with the most popular guy, the one that made fun of me nonstop. When I pointed that out, Enzo's smile dropped, and he looked kind of sad. He sat down on my couch with me and apologized for himself and his friends. We talked for a while and shared the takeout I had ordered. Eventually, I thought to ask the question I should have asked as soon as he walked in through the door. So how'd you end up in the middle of nowhere? Was my question. He explained that he was on his way home from being abroad on a humanitarian mission on an island. He talked about how beautiful it was, how amazing it felt to help people, and how he wished more people did it. I hung on his every word. Something about that island sounded magical. The way he described it really made me want to go. That night, I tossed and turned. I couldn't sleep a wink. I finally got out of bed in the morning to the smell of waffles. Enzo had made himself comfortable in the kitchen. The second I sat down, I decisively said, I want you to take me to the island. He put a waffle in front of me and he talked about why I wanted to go, and I told him why. He thought wanting to help people was more than a good enough reason, so we made plans. 2 days later, I met him at the airport. I started walking in the direction of my private plane, but he grabbed my elbow and led me somewhere else. No way I'm getting on that, I said. He wanted me to hop on the rusty, tiny little plane. I was surprised one of the wings didn't fall off.
You gotta,
he said.
It's the island's own plane.
He convinced me by saying he had been on it many, many times. When we arrived, the landing was so rough I was surprised that my seatbelt didn't snap. Enzo had this old man pick us up from the tiny airport in a rusty old car. I was starting to see a pattern in everything that belonged to this island. When we got to the town where everyone lived, a whole bunch of people came running towards us. Enzo had people all over him, kids trying to get on his shoulders and old people trying to give him food. He then told them I was there to help out, and they all crowded me instead. I didn't appreciate the kids or the old people or their weird-looking food. They were all too touchy. I was getting claustrophobic, and I couldn't see a road not made of dirt anywhere. I tried to get help from Enzo with all these people, but he was off somewhere else talking to this little old lady. They seemed to be whispering gravely. She looked pretty serious. I managed to get the people to leave me alone, after which I went to Enzo and he took me to where I'd be staying. I'm gonna be honest with you, I was panicking. I had never been somewhere so poor. The young girl who wore torn clothes wasn't in me anymore. I was used to a different lifestyle. Everything felt dirty. The food looked unappetizing. I was losing my mind. Enzo wasn't helping at all. He kept asking me where I got my money from, how I got so rich, and how much I'd be giving to the town. Now that we were here, all he talked about was money, and it was driving me nuts. I wish I never let you in my house, I finally snapped at him. We were in the little house we were staying at.
Wow, I should have expected Miss Billionaire to not care about other people. You're so selfish.
He snapped back. I demanded to know how I was selfish, which triggered a rant. He started going on about how the way I made money was selfish, that I was cheating and wasn't even willing to help those in need.
Do you have any idea what it feels like to be in a place like this, knowing you're off in one of your mansions spending money left and right? I'm from here. This is my home.
He screamed at me. He was so angry, he had turned red.
Gah! All I wanted was for you to spend your big bucks on people who need it. Now I blew it.
He sat down on a chair and rubbed his face. I stormed out of the house and went for a walk. I wanted to kick everything I saw. The roads were dirty, but I noticed there were no trash bins on them. I saw a few fishermen carrying only a few fish, but when I walked down to the marina, I noticed they only had one small boat and their nets were all torn. I realized something. There was so much potential for the island. I ran back to the little cabin to talk to Enzo, but he was gone. He left a sarcastic note saying he'd hope I'd enjoy my time there. I crumpled it up and threw it elsewhere. I then climbed onto my roof to try to get a signal on my phone. When I did, I called my mom. Not a day later, she was there telling me off. My mom had shown up with her many trucks of luggage and employees. See, I had picked more humble attire for my trip here, but my mom heard island and decided to go all out. When we were alone, she sat me down and said, "What is this about you wanting to sponsor this place?" I explained that the island was great, full of hardworking people. My mom didn't believe it. We were arguing when there was a knock on my door. Some kids from the town came to deliver food. I thanked them and gave them some sweets I had bought, then turned at my mom with a beaming smile, but she just asked, "Are you really going to eat that?" I yelled at her for being insensitive, but she just stormed out saying she needed some fresh air. I didn't want to talk to her, but then I felt bad that she was alone, and the clouds were looking pretty dark. I ended up running out the door to look for her. As I ran down a path looking for my mom, it started pouring rain, and the wind picked up. I was worried the trees were about to start tipping over when I heard a loud crash and a scream further down the path. I saw my mom almost fainting at the tree that must have fallen right in front of her. "Mom!" I screamed out. She ran towards me and we hugged. We were scared to move an inch to either side of the road when a little kid came from the bushes. He grabbed my hand and pulled me and my mom into the forest. He took us behind a small house. There was a sort of shed made of metal up against the mountain. He knocked on it and a little door opened. We stepped in and found at least 6 people in there. My mom was impressed by the shed. It actually felt safe. She asked who had built it and a woman stood up from the floor. She explained that a bunch of metal wound up on the beach and she used it to build this weatherproof shed for her and her kids. My mom was so impressed. She kept asking the woman questions while I played with the kids. As soon as the storm passed, we said thank you to our hosts and walked home while talking. "I think I see what you mean," started my mom. "These really are good people. I guess they were dealt a bad hand." "So you'll help me with them?" I asked, full of hope. "Yes, I think I will." She smiled at me. We sat in my living room for days after that, planning everything that we were going to do. A year passed. I left my mom at the house, taking forever to get ready as always, but I had been ready for hours. We were finally inaugurating the new marina. I had the docks redone and bought new boats for the fishermen, equipped with the best gear. I was walking down through the town when I saw a face I hadn't seen in a while. Enzo. He was standing wide-eyed on the now pavemented street. He had 2 suitcases with him. He then saw me and walked towards me, struggling with what to say. "What do you think?" I asked him. After a year, of course I wasn't angry anymore. "I made a few changes, but everyone seems happy," I said excitedly. I was proud of the place. The streets were now made of pavement. There were streetlights powered by windmills and trash cans everywhere to keep the streets clean. I had completely renovated the place.
I'm speechless,
said Enzo. I took him by the elbow, the same way he did to me that day at the airport, and led him down to the marina. The sun was about to set. There was a large red ribbon separating the crowd from the sea. I was handed these huge scissors, which I cut the ribbon with, and everyone ran down to see the new boats.
I think I might stick around,
Enzo said as we watched the crowd run around excited.
If you don't mind, of course.
Well, I definitely don't need your help with anything, I joked, but I think I can find somewhere for you to stay, I said. We then stood in silence looking at the sunset. We were standing in a place that we both loved so much. I guess it was that feeling that made our hands inch closer and closer together until we were holding hands and staring off into the horizon.